My name is Michael Harants. I'm a certified executive chef and culinary educator and a member of the American Culinary Federation in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Our demonstration today is on portioning and trimming a New York strip or short loin, or also known as a sirloin strip. These are the tools needed to fabricate the short loin. Side towels to keep my hands dry for cleanup and to secure the cutting board. A steel, a scimitar, and notice the tip of the knife curves up. It does so to allow for a clean cut on the face of the steak. A boning knife. There are two types of boning knives. Flexible, used to work around large bones, and a stiff boning knife, better suited for cutting through soft cartilage and trimming. Tongs, more side towels, sheet trays to use as receiving containers for edible and inedible product, and a cutting board. I'm going to secure the cutting board with a damp side towel to prevent it from shifting around during the fabrication process. Let's go over a few quick sanitation concerns. As I said, I've opened the package, I've gotten rid of the additional purge and rinsed it off. If you're doing a tremendous amount of meat butchery, you'll want to do it in a cold space or a chilled space in order to maintain the temperature and keeping it out of the danger zone. If you're going to do this, ensure that your station is clean and sanitized. Your tools are clean and sanitized. You've obviously washed your hands. We're going to take a quick tour, but first, let's find out where this piece of meat comes from. The strip loin comes out of the subprimal called the full loin. There are two subprimals within the hind quarter, the full loin and the round. The full loin consists of the short loin, the sirloin, and then the round consists of the top round, the bottom round, the knuckle, the eye. There's several other cuts in there. This is considered a tender piece of meat. A dry heat application is best. A moist heat application will actually dry this piece of meat out, and it's much better to either roast it whole or grill it on a char grill or even a flat top grill. Or the other thing that one can do is a cast iron pan. And there are a couple other dry heat applications you could employ, but do not do a moist heat or a combination cooking heat to this piece of meat. These are more expensive cuts because they're tender, and it's best that you use the dry heat application. As I mentioned earlier, this comes from the full loin, which butts up against the round. Where it butts up against the round, or actually the top sirloin, is on this side of the loin. And on the other side of the loin, you can tell where it comes from. It butts up against the full rib, or also known as the 109 rib, or more commonly known as a prime rib. Trimming starts with removing fat from the front of the strip, getting down to the strap, inserting the tip of the boning knife just under the thick connective tissue where the strip has been removed from the backbone. Looking at the strap, you can see the hard connective tissue that should be removed. This is very tough. Remove as much of the strap as possible. Don't dig too deep. You want a clean face on the loin prior to cutting. The idea is not to have to waste time to retrim, since labor will be a factor into the cost. I'm trimming back about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. Here's another look at why it's important to remove the strap. This is not something you'd want your customer cutting into. I'll usually trim the fat cap, but this loin doesn't have a very thick layer of fat. I'll trim excess after cutting the portions. There's some trimming required on the bottom of the loin, so flip it over, look for any connective tissue to be removed. Normally you'll find remaining connective tissue where the loin was removed from the bones. This is a fairly clean strip. We can address further cleanup post-portioning. I'll flip this around. I like to start portioning from the rib end and address the vein steaks at the end, and keep your station clean by cleaning as you go. I'll square off the loin to get sharp looking steaks by removing a small slice. Not too much, keeping in mind that every ounce has a cost. You'll notice I'm referencing my thumb. I use the knuckle lines on my thumb for a standard thickness and usually a standard weight. This depends on several factors: the weight of the strip, the fat cap, and the size of your thumb. The first cut can be an educated guess on the weight. You'll develop your own reference as you gain experience. Notice how I'm using the scimitar. The first cut forward is as deep as possible, pulling back, and then a final cut forward to release the steak from the loin. The curved tip of the scimitar allows for minimal cutting action. This gives the steak a clean face. No other cuts into the steak that would make for a poor presentation. This may be the last steak before we get to the vein. This is the first portion with the vein showing. This could be a portion to serve, but more likely it would be cut again and used for a smaller portion like a steak sandwich, but in many locations this would not be portioned for center cut or center of the plate. Since I am in my home kitchen and these are for personal use, I'll keep these as steaks. The vein here is more pronounced. You can see the portion just above the vein. Still good sirloin, and in a commercial environment I would stop cutting steaks at this point, trim out the hard connective tissue, but since for home use I'm going to cut one more. Alright, we're finished cutting, and you can see where I've pointed out some of the vein side of some of these steaks, and that's towards the top sirloin end. We're going to address that momentarily, but let's go through what we've got here first. This was the first cut off of the rib end, and all we really did was square that off to have a more even steak. So we're going to trim that, and that's going to become usable meat or edible portion of some way, shape, or form. We've got some beautiful steaks here, but I'm going to just set them aside for now, and then we're going to come back and trim those down momentarily, but let's address the vein end too. So there's 4 steaks, there's 4 more steaks, so we're at 8, we've got 9, we've got 10. So we've got 10 really good steaks. We'll call those center cut. If we were going to take this sirloin and you as a customer ordered a end-to-end sirloin cut portion steak from me as a butcher, I would cut from one end of the sirloin to the other end of the rib, however it was cut, and whatever steaks I cut, that's the way you would get them. That would include this vein end. Now this vein end, like the strap, is very, very tough. So we need to get rid of that. And this is a very generous amount of meat, so we certainly aren't going to be able to make any center of the plate money off of this. So we need to address this somehow. I brought over another receiving pan because I'm running out of room on my sheet tray. So I'm going to take and I'm going to trim this meat down, just following the cap of the fat, leaving as much meat on there as possible. This is no good to me, so this is an edible portion. And then next I can feel, you can't because you're watching me, but I'm going to take and trim this piece of meat out, making sure that I've gotten rid of all that hard vein. And then I'm going to take and just carve that vein out itself. Now, if this were me at home, these would not be a problem. These would be just fine steaks, but since we want to take these and turn them into retail cuts or center of the plate cuts, it's best to take and trim and bring them down. Here's what's left after removing the vein. I'll cut this into 1-inch chunks for sirloin kebabs, or then cut them into 1/2-inch chunks for sauteed sirloin tips. We'll take one last look at each steak and do a final trim. That includes shaping the tail and trimming the fat cap close to 1/4 inch. I like to keep this little eye in the tail. I'll trim above it and remove some more of the cap. You can see these steaks have some very nice marbling. We finished cutting all the strips. We have 10 solid strip steaks here. These are all center of the plate options or banquet opportunities here. We started off that strip loin, it was 12.86 pounds. So I said in the beginning there'd be an assignment at the end, and here it comes. 12.86 pounds was our as purchased weight. That is the strip as I bought it from the purveyor. I trimmed it and cut the steaks, and my yield was 10 steaks. So remember the yield. What I have left after that is I have inedible trim and I have edible trim. So let's weigh that and find out what we have. We'll start with the inedible trim. So this is all the fat and the connective tissue. Remember, the strap is in there, and there is some meat left on the fat itself, but it's not worth going after. I think at the most we'd find that we would glean maybe 2 ounces, maybe 3 ounces of something that we would end up grinding anyway. So it really wasn't worth the effort. We ended up here with 2.11 pounds of fat and inedible portion or inedible trim. Next, we want to weigh our sirloin tips. These were, this is the byproduct of cutting ourselves, and we're going to find out what we have here, because you're going to need to determine what the value is. And don't forget that small steak, which I like to call lunch. That is also well too. So we have 2.5 pounds of edible trim. This is the byproduct. If you cut steaks on your own, this is what you end up with, because you can't use all of them because it's just some steaks that will not eat well, and that is not something you want to present to your customer. So we have this. This does have value to us. But where will we make all of our money? So if we really cut this for all the steaks is where we need to make our money. So your task is to determine what is the individual unit cost for the steak. I told you earlier it was 12.86 pounds of as purchased. The price per pound was $8 a pound. What is the cost of each individual steak? Then you'll want to determine what the cost of your waste is and what the cost of your edible waste or your edible trim is. And we'll come back to that, and we'll towards the end of the video. We've trimmed the strip loin, we've portioned the strip loin, we have 10 steaks. I'm going to get 4 ready to go on the grill a little bit later, because remember, this is a tender piece of meat that responds so very well to dry heat application. So we're going to take 4 steaks. And then I'm going to season with salt and pepper. Cover these up and allow them to chill a little bit in the refrigerator. Just lightly seasoned, and we're going to do both sides.
That actually some nice sound for you. Yeah.
Please do the costing exercise in the accompanying attachment. Continue to challenge yourself for greater culinary skill development and make good food. Thank you.